A few years ago, I saw something at a wedding that I didn't think I'd ever see in my life. The pastor was talking about a young couple that were standing there at the altar. And right near the end of the wedding, this is what he said. Well, this is that special moment, the kiss, that we all look forward to at the end of a wedding. But before we do this, let me share something with you. This is certainly the moment we're always waiting for, but it's especially true with this couple. Many of you may not realize that this couple really has waited until marriage, and this is going to be their very first kiss. Then he said, "You may kiss your bride." And the moment those lips met, 400 people stood up and cheered like it was like an NCAA basketball game, and just this huge buzzer beater kind of a cheer. Who was this young couple? That was Jason and Rose Stoeker. Jason is my firstborn son. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing that day. I mean, I probably looked like a bobblehead doll just kind of looking around, because it's just stunning to me what God has been able to do in my family. Consider this. When I was 23 years old, I had 4 girlfriends. I was sleeping with 3 of them, engaged to be married to 2 of them. When my son was 23 years old, he was standing at the wedding altar sharing his very first kiss with a woman. And if you stop to think about how amazing that is, in one generation, God was able to change the entire direction of my family tree. And you see, that had been my dream for some time, mostly because of some of the things that God had said to me early on. You see, the bottom line is this: God isn't asking us to become fervent and anxious about a set of rules when it comes to our sexual purity. He is anxious and fervent and wants us to be anxious and fervent for us to become normal. Normal like Jason, treating a woman right, marrying her, and moving on in life according to God's ways. Now, that is our first call always as Christians, is to become normal. We need to become blameless and pure in the midst of a crooked generation, a dark universe. Why is this so important? Well, we're living in a special time. If you go to Matthew 24:12, it says this: "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold." And what he's talking about is the last days. And I used to always look at that verse and kind of focus on the second half of the verse. You know, everyone's love is going to grow cold. And I used to just ponder what in the world could make all the Christians' love grow cold near the end of time. And it wasn't until more recently that I began to look at the first half of that verse, and I realized that it was really, I mean, it said so from the beginning, but I never really realized that it was saying it's because of the increase of wickedness. And I started thinking, what wickedness would increase so much that the love of Christians would actually die? And I believe it is the increase of sexual sin across this earth. And if you look at some of the things we're seeing these days, it's very obvious that there's been a big increase. I went to a Canadian Bible school a few years ago, and they did a survey before I got there to just kind of see the state of the student body sort of before I taught and then maybe after I taught. And the survey was amazing. Part of it wasn't amazing at all. I mean, the survey showed that 100% of the guys at this Christian school were looking at porn at least once a week. Okay, and just the way our eyes are created and some of those things, it's not like that's such a bizarre thing. But what was happening with the girls, I mean, that's the shocking thing, because 87% of the girls were looking at porn at least once a week. And that is just shocking. I mean, maybe you have to be a little older, but I can still remember when Playgirl magazine, which was set up to show off the bodies of men, that went bankrupt back in the 70s, just out of lack of interest. I mean, girls just weren't interested at all. And to see that life in America has changed so much, in North America and Canada, just countries actually around the world, when you look at the statistics, where 87% of the girls can be looking at porn too. That is a marked increase in wickedness. And you have to ask yourself the question, could it be that our centralized culture is making the love of God grow cold? And is it possible that we've normalized wickedness and we've said, okay, this is normal now, and it's fine, everything's okay? Could it be that's driven the Holy Spirit from our midst, maybe in the ways that it used to be here? And I think it's very, very possible. I have seen things recently online, and where you're seeing these blogs where Christians are just writing in talking about their attitudes towards sexual sin and towards masturbation, and it's just shocking how flippant they are about, oh well, it's just a good clean fun. And the fact of the matter is, it's driving marriages apart, it's driving people apart, couples, and it's driving young men crazy in their minds trying to get a handle on it. Now, that is how we're starting to live. But how are we supposed to be living as Christians? Well, we can go back to the Bible for that. We should be seeing it the way Peter talked about, 2 Peter 3:11 through 12 and 14. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. So then, dear friends, since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with him. What's Peter saying? Christians, their wickedness should not be increasing. They should be making every effort to decrease it. And the question for all of us today is, are you making every effort to decrease the sin and the wickedness in your life? Your first call as a Christian is to work out your salvation and to make sure that happens. Paul said in Philippians this, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. Do everything without complaining or arguing. Why? So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in a universe as you hold out the word of life. Okay. That is what we're supposed to look like, and yet that isn't much like what we look like these days. And I had a talk with Michael, my son Michael, about this a few years back, and what had happened was he had decided after a game that he wanted to ride home with me, which is fine because I like having him ride home with me. But when he got in, I kind of teased him. I said, well, why are you wanting to go home with me instead of the other guys? And he said, well, for the first thing, I know you'll stop at McDonald's for me and the bus driver won't, okay, which is typical of an offensive tackle. And but the second reason was a little more sober. I mean, he said, you know, Dad, I really like the bus rides to the games because we all have a lot of camaraderie. We're all pulling together. We're going to win the game. But he said after the game, I really don't fit in with the guys very well. I mean, they make fun of me that I'm not dating. They make fun of me that I'm not doing the kinds of things they do. And so in some ways I'm part of the team. In some ways I really don't feel part of the team. And they say I'm strange. And I said to him, you know, son, do you know that the Apostle Paul prophesied about your life in this day? And his eyes got big. Paul prophesied about me? I said, yeah. I said, it was about 2,000 years ago, and I quoted the scripture that I just read. And, you know, I told him about the fact that, you know, we need to be stars shining in the universe. And I said to him, I mean, if you're a star, what is that going to mean? I mean, why do stars shine out? And he said, well, they're full of light, and they're against a black background. Okay. And I said, light always stands out in darkness, right? Yeah. And I said, you know, you're standing out and you're looking different, and your friends say there's something wrong with you, but according to the Apostle Paul, there's nothing wrong with you at all. There's something right with you when you're standing out like this and people don't feel you fit in. So I just want to tell you, son, you are shining. This dark universe is brightened by your normality, and you can stand true. And you see, men and women can become normal, and we can shine light into this darkness simply by the way we live. Young men and women can become normal in every way. Now, I need you to remember as we move forward in this that, remember, your call to sexual purity is not all about him. You see, it's about you and bringing you to normal and making sure you don't fall into prisons. The thing is, we also need to look at the opposite side. What happens when we don't engage this battle for purity? What happens if we just decide we're not going to? We don't just pay prices in our relationships when we do that. We abort the very destiny God has for us as Christians. and we destroy the long-term destiny God intends for both your family tree and for his own family tree. To help explain why God is so urgent about our sexual sin in this way, I want to just take you back to when I was a young father again. Take you back to when Jason, who I just talked about at the wedding altar, back when he was 1.5, 2 years old. He used to wander around and toddle around, like I said earlier, with a pacifier in his mouth. He'd grin up at me and say, "Dad, you're my hero. I want to grow up to be just like you." And, so many times that would just stab me through the heart. I just scream inside, "No, don't become like me. Don't become like me." I wanted so badly for him to break the chain, that pattern of my grandfathers, who were both hooked on porn, my dad, me, my grandfathers, my dad, they left their wives for mistresses. I wanted that finished in our life. I didn't want that to go on. And I used to wake up at dawn many times. I've always been an early riser, and I would wake up in the morning and Brenda would be sleeping, and I would just start thinking about life. And I would just sometimes these silent screams, I would scream them at the bedroom ceiling and say, "God, why are you so mean? Why did you give me a son? You know what my family's like. Why didn't you just give me daughters?" Because I just knew there was not a thing I could do to change this pattern. I couldn't even fix it in my own life. How am I going to fix it in my son's life? And I just scream at the ceiling. And it happened many times. It was this trauma going on in my life, and seeing my son and wishing I could do something and knowing I couldn't. Why did you give me a son? The interesting thing was, one Sunday morning, God had every intention to tell me exactly why he had given me a son. Okay, because, we often look at these things and we go, God must have just been blind to do something this mean. But he has a plan and a meaning for each of our lives. And it happened one Sunday morning when my pastor began preaching about a man named Jonadab. And Jonadab's an interesting man in the Bible. He only appears twice. But he clearly was a man who was much like some of the great spiritual leaders of our day, like Billy Graham or Luis Palau or people like that. Everyone knew who he was. Everybody knew what he stood for. Okay, he was a great Christian or great religious leader in his day. And the first time we see Jonadab is in a scene with another guy named Jehu. Okay, so God had called Jehu to go in and to take out Jezebel and Ahab, the wicked king and queen. So he had said to Jehu, "Okay, go in, destroy everything that has anything to do with them, and I'm going to make you king in his place." Well, Jehu got right at it. He grabbed his sword and started butchering everybody, and then he was on his way to another city to butcher them. And on his way to that city, he saw Jonadab walking along the road. And he says to himself, "This is my opportunity to show off," or something along those lines. Because he goes up to Jonadab and he says, "Hey, come and see my zeal for the Lord." And he wanted Jonadab to ride with him in his chariot to the next city so that Jonadab could watch his zeal for the Lord as he butchered everyone. And Jonadab got into the chariot, went with him, and rode with him the rest of the day. Okay, so that's the first time that we saw him. The second time we see Jonadab in the Bible is quite a number of years later. And I just want to read the scripture to you so you can get a feel for what I'm talking about, what my pastor was talking about that morning. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord during the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. "Go to the Rechabite family and invite them to come to one of the side rooms of the house of the Lord and give them wine to drink." Now, the Rechabite family is Jonadab's family. He's the head of that family. "So I went to get the whole family of the Rechabites. I brought them into the house of the Lord. Then I set bowls of wine and some cups before the men of the Rechabite family, and I said to them, 'Drink some wine.' But they replied, 'Oh, no, we do not drink wine, because our forefather Jonadab, son of Rechab, gave us this command: neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine.' We have obeyed everything our forefather Jonadab, son of Rechab, has commanded us. Neither we, nor our wives, nor our sons and daughters have ever drunk wine, or built houses to live in that had vineyards, fields of crops. We have lived in tents and have fully obeyed everything our forefather Jonadab commanded us. Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying this, This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Go and tell the men of Judah and the people of Jerusalem, Will you not learn a lesson and obey my words, declares the Lord? Jonadab, son of Rechab, ordered his sons not to drink wine, and this command has been kept. To this day they do not drink wine, because they obey their forefathers' command. But I, your Lord, have spoken to you again and again, yet you have not obeyed me. You know, that is a great lesson for any of us on any day. And God was using Jonadab and his family's obedience as an example to the Jews, so that they would change their ways and turn around, all right? But for me that day, that lesson wasn't the one that hit my heart, not even close, okay? It wasn't even something in the scripture itself that hit me that day. It was something, it's something to do with what my pastor said about the scripture. And he said this, do you know how many years passed between the time that Jonadab was walking and riding in that chariot with Jehu and then this day that Jeremiah was asking his children to come in and drink wine? Of course, none of us knew. He said 300 years. I remember when he said 300 years, it felt like, literally, it felt like I got hit in the chest. And inside, I barely heard the rest of the sermon because inside, my brain was just churning. 300 years? Do you mean to tell me that I can have this kind of an impact on my family that 300 years later, they're still following my example? And I started to think about how hard that must have been in that day with wine, because wine was a great big deal. Everybody drank wine. But I started to think very quickly about my sexual sin. And I'm thinking to myself, is it really possible that I could win this battle against impurity in such a way that 300 years from now, my descendants could be saying, hey, we have obeyed everything our forefather Fred said. And, you know, he told us never to look at porn. And we, to this day, our wives, our sons and daughters, none of us have ever looked at porn. I mean, I can't tell you how shocking that was to me that day. And I was so excited. I started to think, oh, I can change. I don't have to wait for Jason to change this. I can change our family tree. I can be the watershed where everyone before me was, you know, mistresses and alcohol and drunkenness and porn, and everyone after me is, you know, concerned for the purposes of God and holiness and purity. And I mean, the possibilities began to run through my head for days and then weeks. And I was so excited about the possibilities. But I hesitated. And you say to yourself, what in the world? Why would you hesitate? You're being offered the opportunity to change your leafless family tree, this old gnarled mess, into something with lush branches and hope. But you see, I understood something very clearly because I had already struggled with this for so long. I realized that I could go to this entire fight and fight it right down until every tooth fell out of my head and every blood dropped out of my veins. But that wouldn't guarantee any change, because it was going to take more than a Merle Hay moment for me to win this battle and to change the direction of the family tree. What else was it going to take? It was going to take someone to step up to my side and join me in the battle. And who was that going to have to be? That little 1.5-year-old drooling little squirt with a pacifier in his mouth. And he didn't look very much like a warrior. And beyond that, how can you tell what your kids are going to do? And so I kind of began to waffle. I mean, I'd really like to change my family tree, but I'm not sure I want to go through all that effort because there's no guarantees here. And I waffled for a couple of months or so. until one morning I was in prayer, and the Lord was tired of my waffling. And he put this question to me. Are you going to be the one to drive that stake into the ground right here and stop this thing? Or are you going to leave the job for someone better than you, someone down the line? And my heart shattered. Okay. See, I didn't like the thought that someone better than me, someone that loves God's purposes better than me, could exist. And I didn't want, I couldn't stand that thought. The second thing is, I knew that if I didn't answer this call, guess what? Guess who was the next person that was going to hear these awful words? It's going to be Jason. By the time he grew up and he was a young father, if I failed, God was going to go to him and say, are you going to be the one? Your father failed. He didn't even try. Are you going to be the one that drives a stake into the ground? Or are you going to leave it for someone better than you somewhere down the line? And I realized in those moments, he is not going to fight by himself. I mean, I may fight, I may lose, and I fully expect to lose, and I did. Okay, but he is not going to fight alone, this little boy of mine. So, a few days later, that Merle Hay moment came, and I engaged the battle for keeps. And I did expect to lose, but against all odds, I won. Okay, because God's good, and he's powerful, and he can kick anybody's rear end around. And but that still left me in a very difficult spot, because I was winning. My relationship with my wife was outstanding. My relationship with my kids was just outstanding. But I didn't know what Jason was going to do. What did he do? He stepped up. He did the normal thing. Now, you may say to me, what are you talking about? He did the normal thing. Well, remember, we don't define normal based upon what's common. We know what the common thing is. The common thing is to try as soon as you can to go to bed with a girl, because that's your ticket into manhood in this culture. You're not a man going to any locker room. You're not a man until you've gone to bed with a girl. Okay. That is the common ticket into manhood. But you see, that whole concept of normal is tied to the mark that Jesus has set. What was Jesus's ticket into manhood? Do you remember? We all know the story. He had gone to Passover when he was a young man with Mary and Joseph, and they had been there the entire time, and then the family left to go back home. Mary and Joseph thought Jesus was with the pack, but he wasn't. Okay? So they get down the road a couple days, they, oh, Jesus, where is he? Okay? And as they rush back to Jerusalem, they look all over the place. Where did they find him? Found him in the temple. And what did he say? Did you not know I need to be about my Father's business? Why? He was at the age of manhood, that age when it's time for young men to become men and be about their Father's business. And that's what Jesus saw is the rite of passage for every young man on this earth. He set the standard. It wasn't going to bed with a girl. It was being about his Father's business and being in the temple. So that's why I say that Jason did the normal thing, because Jason quickly got around my business on this issue. And he joined me in this battle when he became a young man. I told you when he was 11, 12, he made those decisions to stay pure. He grew up, he followed, and that destiny that he and I have together that I couldn't do by myself, it actually happened. And because he stepped into the battle with me, I won, he won. The whole direction of the family tree changed. Okay? And that's a beautiful thing, and that's what God's desiring from us as men. Jason stepped into his destiny of what? Being normal. He stepped up into his destiny of taking on the Stoeker name and carrying it well. And he stepped up into his destiny of taking on the Christian name and carrying that name well. Did I play a part in that? Absolutely. Of course I did. Okay? And that's the whole point. There is a joint destiny between you and your offspring when it comes to this battle. And that's every bit as important to God as your own personal purity is. Okay? Your decisions will affect your children's destiny. If you go to Hebrews 12:1, listen to this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Sure, my sons, my daughters, they still have to run their race, but they don't have to run their race with the same weights I ran my race with, because I can make decisions to break off that generational curse so that their battle is different. Since I've now talked about my family tree, let's talk about God's family tree, because his family tree is very important to him, just like mine is to me. He longs for all the same things in his family tree. He wants beautiful branches. He wants lush branches. He wants the branches represented by your family to be lush and pure. He wants the branch represented by yours and yours and yours. And he wants that all to be as green and lush as possible, but guess what? He can't do it by himself either. As powerful as he is, he cannot accomplish this without you. He needs his sons to step up and to be about his business in this arena. You see, that's why this battle is so much more than just a simple struggle against sexual sin. This is your fight for destiny. This is your fight for manhood. This is the thing that defines who you are in the long term. Okay? And carrying the family name well is what destiny is all about. I guarantee it. That's what it's all about. It's part of manhood. It's part of authenticity. It's part of being the same person when you're alone with your computer as you are sitting here with all your brothers, looking pure and holy this morning or this afternoon. Okay? Look, are you the same when you're with your computer? That's what manhood is. That's what authenticity is. And that's what we need to have in order to change the destiny of our families. Now, let's talk about this whole thing about carrying the name well. Because I think if we look again at stories based upon human life, I think we get a real picture as to what God's hoping for from us in the Christian life. When my daughter was a sophomore in high school, she decided she was going to take an AP, Advanced Placement, chemistry class. Now, we did not know that sophomores should not take AP chemistry classes because they do not have the study habits and they do not have the ability to really handle a class like that. But it's my daughter. She signed up for it, so that's cool. I just didn't look enough into it, I guess. So she gets into this class. She's a straight A student, so I'm thinking, what can happen, right? The first test that comes back, she has a D, and she's just shattered. Never seen a D in her life. The next test that comes back, D. And she comes home, she's broken. And she falls into my arms sobbing. She says, "Oh, I'm so dumb, Dad. I have to drop this class. There's no way I can keep with this." And I said, "Look, you're not dumb." I said, something's going on here. So let's talk to the teacher. So we talked to the teacher, said, "Well, she's a sophomore? What's she doing in here?" And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're the teacher. Why don't you know she's a sophomore? And, it's all these kinds of weird things going on in my head. But, the fact is, he said that she shouldn't be in here. But he said she can stay if she wants. And so we went home, and she was just bawling. She's saying, I can take this again when I'm a junior or senior, Dad, but I probably should just drop this. And I said, okay, if you drop this, it's fine with me, but let me give you an alternative. Stokers don't quit. So if you decide you'd like to stay in this class, I promise you, if you end up with an F, I won't say a peep. If you end up with a D, I won't care. It's just your choice to do what Stokers do, and that's good enough for me. She was kind of surprised and just left. 2 days later, she came back to me. She said, "Dad, I kind of like the sound of that. I'd like to do it the Stoker way. I don't want to quit." And I said, "Good. That's fine. I will do everything I can to help you with this, and if you don't do well, it's okay." So she found a study group at school. She began studying with them. The next test, she got a C-. Well, she still hated it, but it's an improvement. And the next time after that, she got a C+. And she just started moving up little by little, started getting some in the B range, and then there was finally one test she actually got an A and set the curve in the class. Oh, the seniors hated her. Okay, it's just a big mess. But of course, we're laughing inside because it was fun. It was a big challenge to her. Okay, and by the end of the class, she ended up with a B. You know, all the D's helped bring down anything else she did in the class, and it was one of the few B's she got all through high school. But she will tell you today that is the best grade she's ever got, is getting that B in chemistry because of how brutal it was to get through it. And you see, one of the things I try to do is teach my kids what the Stoeker name means. And all of us do that. We use our name to help define who our children are. Another thing that happened with Michael in football, there was a coach that he had that nobody really liked, but he was mean. And there was a tree off in the distance. It looked like 17 miles away. And whenever the offensive line would make a mistake or somebody jumps off sides, he would just say, hit the tree. And the entire offense would have to run around that tree 17 miles away and come on back. And I remember one day I was sitting in the stands watching this in practice one day. And, I saw the coach say hit the tree, and the entire offense runs off that way. And Michael, because he hadn't really hit puberty yet, he was rounder than he was tall. So long distance running was hard. And so he was running, falling further and further behind than the others. And I saw the skill players go around the tree and start heading back. And instead of going around the tree himself, he tucked in behind them, short of the tree, and headed back with them. So he was now he wasn't behind the pack, he was with the pack. And I'm just going, oh, brother, that's my son, okay? And so we got home that night, and I said, son, I saw that you didn't go all around that tree. He just kind of chuckled. And I said, I remember what it was like before puberty, and I remember how hard it was to run in August. So I'm not going to say anything much about this, but I do want you to know that Stokers don't stop short of the tree. And he said, okay, Dad, I won't stop short of the tree next time. And but we still laugh about it today. But you see, the thing is, you can use these moments and say, Stokers don't stop short of the tree. Stokers don't quit. And you begin to define what it means to be a Stoker. You define what it means to be part of the destiny of being a Stoker, okay? And, of course, that requires someone to define the name by setting a good example. The name has to be worth emulating. They have to look up to the name. Are you currently inspiring your kids to greatness by who you are? I remember I was down in Miami at an event, and this was probably the only event I've ever taken my family to when I've spoken. And I was up there talking about family destiny, just like I'm talking about right now. And Michael was sitting out in the audience, and by this time he's a little older, quite a bit bigger. And so he's sitting there listening to me. I come down off the stage to sit with my family in that front section, and he lays his head on my shoulder and begins to cry. Okay. He's bigger than me at this point, so it looks kind of weird to see this big guy crying on my shoulder. And he whispers this into my ear, Dad, I am so glad to be part of this family and this destiny. That's what I'm talking about. You can set a kind of example for your family so that they are happy to be part of it, and they're in it with you, implicitly working to make everything come out the way God would want it to come out. The trouble is that sometimes grace confuses us, okay, when it comes to our Christian family and our Christian name. See, we all kind of get it when it comes to our earthly name, Stoker, okay, we don't quit, this and that. Okay, but with the Christian name, it gets kind of goofy for us. Okay, this is what we say. This is the age of grace. We don't have to toe the lines this closely anymore. We don't have to be this obedient. God forgives our mistakes, so we need to relax, okay? Look, this is the age of grace, but that doesn't make this the age of running around and doing whatever you want, whenever you want. The fact of the matter is, you still have to carry your name well. And the fact is, living like a Christian is not a sometime thing. It's a way of life. It's what we do. It's our identity. And As we get that identity and understand that identity, I can tell you from my own experience in this battle for purity, the more you have that identity that you're a Christian and this is what Christians do and this is what Christians don't do, the tighter you have that identity, the weaker the battle gets. I mean, you don't even care. I mean, the whole concept of should I look at this porn or not, that question never even comes up. It's just, well, of course not. Christians don't do that. And it just becomes an automatic thought process. Just like Stoeker's automatic thought process. We don't quit. Christians, we don't look at porn. And it becomes just a way of life. Now, we saw a glimpse of what Stokers do and what they don't do. And that begs the question, who defines the Christian name for us? Well, it's our Father and our big brother Jesus. They're the ones that define it for us. And this is what it says in Galatians 5:13. You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge in the sinful nature. Okay? Christians don't do that. Now, we can say, yeah, this is the age of grace, and we can lie and cheat and do it. But the fact is, Christians don't do that. In other words, you don't use grace as a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's an identity card. It's a membership card. How then should we as Christians live in this age of grace? We should live like Christians. More specifically, we should live in a way that would qualify us for the 144,000 club talked about in Revelations. And you can find reference for that in Revelation 14, 1 through 5. I want to read the scripture to you and make a couple of points. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Okay, they're carrying the name. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. That's what Christians do. They were purchased from among men and offered as firstfruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Now, who are these 144,000? I don't know. I'm not sure anybody really knows. And I'm not really talking about we need to become one of these 144,000. What I want you to focus on is the criteria for their membership in that club. What was the criteria? Okay. That they did not defile themselves with women. That was a big criteria. And I would ask you a question. Could you qualify for the 144,000 club, given your life? I can't. I defiled myself with women, way too many, all right? So, in a sense, I've missed my chance. I've defiled myself too much, but because of grace, I can live that way now. Okay? I can live that way now. And I can affect whether my children qualify for this club by living that way now. I can change my destiny, and I can change their destiny, and the entire destiny of my family tree. Grace isn't just a get-out-of-jail-free card. The original meaning of grace includes the concept of power to become. It literally means the power to become. Because of grace, then, I can now live like that 144,000. Because of grace, I can love my sons enough to guide them to be about their Father's business. And because of grace, you can too. You see what I mean? Now, I didn't always think this way, guys. I used to read that verse, 144,000, I used to say, what kind of impartation must they have had, that some special thing that God planted in them that they could live this way and never be defiled by women? They must have had some kind of gift. I always thought that until I raised one. And then it didn't make sense to me all of a sudden. Well, he's just my son. He has no special impartation. How did he get like this? And I went back and looked at the scripture, and I realized I had kind of slid over one part of that verse. It says, these are those who do not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. They didn't have an impartation. They kept themselves pure. They made a decision, just like we've been talking about. The fact of the matter is, they decided to follow Christ wherever he goes. And I had a complete change in what it takes to live this way. And I no longer believe that we have to have some kind of special grace or some kind of special impartation in order to walk purely. Destiny is not imparted. It's not imparted. Destiny comes about through 50,000 seemingly insignificant decisions you make day to day throughout your whole life, and maybe a few significant revelations along the way. For the most part, it's today, am I going to look at porn? Tomorrow, am I going to look at porn? Am I going to look at that girl in the string bikini? Am I going to think about my old girlfriend when I'm on top of my wife? Those are just, you either say yes or you say no. And it's through making those 50,000 decisions along the way where your destiny and your family's destiny is created in that crucible. Decisions that either stop you short of the tree or that take you around the tree. And my question to you is, which will it be for you? Are you going to stop short of the tree? Or are you going to go around God's tree and go where he's called you to do? I got to tell you, I will never forget the night that Michael chose what he was going to do. I had just gone to bed at midnight or 12:30, and I had to get up at 4 o'clock to be able to make it to the airport to catch a flight to go speak somewhere. And I remember him rushing into my room probably right around 2. Okay, so I'd only been sleeping an hour and a half or so. And he rushed into my room and he said, Dad, I need to speak to you. I'm like, go away. You know, I'll call you at the airport in the morning. Nice dad, right? But I was just calmed. He said, no, Dad, I can't wait. I need to talk to you right now. So I'm kind of coming out of my groggy state, and I said, well, okay, let me wash my face. You go down to the family room. I'll be right down. So get up and splash some cold water in my face, try to wake up, head on downstairs. And I said, okay, son, what's the deal? And he said, Dad, I just had this dream. He goes into this dream, and, he was talking so fast in such a panic. I have to be honest, I think I only caught about 1 out of every 3 words. I mean, he's just... And but I could catch enough words to understand that he had had a sensual dream. He was very concerned what that meant about his salvation. And he was very concerned about what that meant just in general as a Christian. And so, I calmed him down. I said, son, look, okay, you had a sensual dream. God's not going anywhere. It's part of being a guy, okay? And I'm not going anywhere. So, it's okay. And he kind of calmed down, and I thought, this is a perfect time to tell him about the Stoeker destiny. Because I had given it to him in some snippets, but this is the time to really talk to him about it. So I just late at night, I needed my sleep, I just started talking. I started talking about what it was like in college with the 4 girlfriends and sleeping with 3, okay? I started talking to him about getting married, and I told him about his grandfathers and his great-grandfathers and what had been the pattern. And I talked about how I tried to break that pattern and did, and then Jason came along, and then he decided to follow. And so I'm going through everything I've said to you, and I literally for an hour and a half, I just laid it all out from start to finish. And I said, now son, right at the end, I said, now son, right today, there are two Stoekers that are living the way God has called them to live from a sexual point of view. I said, there are 2 Stoekers on the face of this earth that are normal in their sexuality. For a while, there was only 1. And then Jason decided to join me, and then there are 2. And son, you know what? You can make the same decision, then there'll be 3 of us. And then I said, someday Jason will have a son, and you'll have 2 sons, and then there'll be 6 of us. And then they'll have sons, there'll be 12 of us. Then they'll have sons, there'll be 24 of us. And as I continued like that, I saw his eyes begin to glaze over, and he's catching it. 12 and 24. Yeah. And I just stopped at 24, and I just looked at him, and I could see the wheels turning in his eyes. And then he stopped it. It's one of the most indelible moments I'll ever have with my children. He just looked me in the eye, just kind of caught my eye, and he said, "Dad, I want that. I want that." And you see, we can tell from that story what Michael wants. But the big question today, really for you, is what do you want? What do you want for your family? What do you want for your destiny and the destiny of your family tree? That is a huge question. We all know what your Heavenly Father wants. He's longing for you to be normal. He's longing for you to join with Him in a great adventure, a great destiny. A destiny that's meant to be awesome in Him. That's what He wants. And He's given a special offer to you. I had a pastor, Joel Budd. He was my very first pastor, the one that when I first became saved, I sat in his marriage class for those years, or for those months before I met Brenda. And Joel was telling me a story about his life later. He had moved on down into Oklahoma. He became a head pastor. And he said that he was standing down at the altar one day during worship time. And if you knew Joel, you'd kind of chuckle at this. But he was kind of patting himself on the back. And he was saying, you know, I'm a really pure guy. I'm a holy guy. And he started kind of going through with himself about all the things that he does to stay pure, and he's not watching this or doing that. And then suddenly, right in the middle of worship, and the Lord begins to speak, and he said, "What about this? And what about this? And what about this?" And he suddenly was kind of going, yeah. And you see, it's probably only 2-3% impure, right? But he was proud, and God was pointing that out to him. But the thing that was really amazing to me is what the Lord said to him after that. You know, the Lord He's a good Father. I mean, He's awesome. He doesn't just point out, oh yeah, well, what about this? This is what He said to Joel. Joel, if you choose to look away from the things you can see, I will show you things that you could have never seen. You see, we have a choice of what we look at. And if we will choose to look away from the things that will bring that hint of sexual immorality into our lives, God will show us things that we could have never otherwise seen, because we will be so tight with Him in our destiny with Him that we'll be able to run like crazy unencumbered and be able to see things, accomplish things in Him, and just not only surprise us, but in the long run, angels will clasp their hands over their mouth and go, "Wow, look what God did," for all of eternity. You see, that's what He's done for me. I have no business having any ministry or any destiny, given my background. But the Lord He gave me what I needed. I chose to follow Him wherever He went. And that opened up doors so that I have the kind of joy and excitement of being part of His great work every day. And I have the joy of watching my children be about my business. And I have the joy of seeing my grandchildren growing up the same way and beginning to see those beginnings of the 300 years starting to take form. You need to understand something. When I made the decision to engage this battle 25 years ago, whenever it was, the only thing I wanted was for that distance between me and God to go away. I wasn't looking for a ministry. I wasn't looking for destiny. I just want to be close. Okay? But see, that's the kind of God that we have. Okay? if you make the decision to kill this thing, the possibilities are endless. You can change the direction of your family and have impact for generation upon generation upon generation. And the only thing that has to happen is that you have to catch that vision and step out, because he's already done what needs to be done to give you the power. You need to simply make that choice and move in that direction. I can tell you, after all these years, there's been hard at times, okay? I mean, I look at my two daughters, and I know one of the reasons it's hard for them to get dates is because I'm their dad, okay? Young men are scared to death of being my son-in-law. I am absolutely sure of it. And I'm the nicest guy, okay? But it tears at my heart. There have been times through my life where it's torn. Have I done the right thing to teach my children to be pure? Because they've taken abuse. And I can't say that this has been an easy walk, but I can say this. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would not trade this great adventure for the world, and I would not trade the beauty of a family that's lush and pure. So, let's bring it back to you. What do you want? What do you want?